First of all, I'm very pleased with how Queensland's going, and I think the Queensland government has done the right thing. What they did was lock down Brisbane in order to kill the spread of the virus and do extensive testing. So they did the right thing. It would have been no doubt debilitating and difficult, but they did the right thing. And the Queensland approach, the Victorian approach, I think is the right approach. We need to eliminate the virus from Australia. It would be, I think, advisable if New South Wales eliminated the virus from Sydney, and that would, of course, mean that we could rest a lot easier across Australia. In terms of Western Australia's approach to Queensland, we'll get health advice on what the appropriate course is. I do note that Brisbane is going to go through a further 10 days of restrictions, mask wearing, 4 square metre rule, restrictions on the number of people attending sporting events and the like. So I wouldn't expect we'd take any action before Queensland is sure they don't have community spread of the virus. But at the end of that point in time, we'll get further health advice.
So would you expect to get that new health advice at the end of this?
Yeah, well, we don't. Queensland doesn't know if they've got community spread. They don't know. So, and this is the British strain, which is highly contagious and obviously causing mass deaths across Britain. So we need to just be certain before we take any action. One of the things over the course of last year is there's been so many steps and there's been so many things we've had to do to protect Western Australia. I couldn't even list them all. But opening and closing borders is obviously difficult. So before you open a border, you want to be absolutely sure so you don't have to close it down again immediately. So we just want to be absolutely sure before such time as we open the border to any other state.
Does that mean though that you are
cases being contained there? We're following health advice, but the health advice seems to change. It used to require spread of more than one case. Have you questioned the inconsistency, or why can't we question the chief health officer?
Yeah, look, I answered all these questions last week. The British strain is very difficult. It's very, very virulent. It's very, very contagious. The Commonwealth Government has halved the intake of Australians from overseas because of the danger posed by the British strain. Every other state government locked down to Brisbane. Western Australia locked down to Queensland because we know that COVID does not respect postcodes. So we just have a very, very cautious, very precautionary approach because we know if the virus gets into the community, it can spread rapidly and it can kill people. So we just want to make sure we do everything we can to prevent the virus coming to WA.
Are you open though to reopening to Queensland before that 28-day threshold is met if there's still no cases after the 10-day stretch? Is that something you can?
It would depend upon health advice. The approach thus far that we adopted for South Australia, for Victoria, for New South Wales, for the entire country was 28 days plus. Now, if the health advice indicates that because of the limited number in Queensland we could do something sooner than that, well, then obviously we would follow the health advice. But you just have to remember, caution works, being careful works, keeping out the virus is our number one aim.
I don't think anyone expected on Friday that 3 days later there'd be no new cases in Queensland. Are you still comfortable and confident that it was the right decision to close to Queensland so quickly?
Yes, I am. Queensland locked down. They locked down Brisbane. Every other state locked down to Brisbane. The Commonwealth halved the number of people coming from overseas. I mean, the country, fortunately, is now very careful about these things. And that's a good thing. We should be careful. I know it shows absolutely no sign of abating in Britain or in America. And we just don't want to get ourselves into that position. I mean, the remarkable story out of all this, and I just hope it continues, is how well Australia as a whole has done. There's no other countries around the world, bar New Zealand, that have done as well as Australia. And I just want that to continue. We get a lot of pressure from all sorts of interest groups and people to relax the restrictions we put in place, to relax borders, to allow things to change. But if we make a mistake and the virus comes in, well, then no one will thank us. Everyone will say, why did you do that? So we're just going to continue to be cautious. Obviously, mistakes can be made. Things can happen that we couldn't have predicted, and we've seen that in other states. But my motto in all of this is caution works, being careful is the right approach.
What's the way to break this impasse, though, with New South Wales running a totally different approach to what WA and most of the other states seem to be doing? Who needs to take some control here? What's the way to get a uniform national approach to dealing with the virus and going down that elimination path?
Well, there's 5 states and 2 territories doing one thing and 1 state doing something different. I'd go with the majority. The states and territories that want to eliminate the virus, I think, have the right approach. The idea that you tick along with the virus and somehow that is a better model is wrong. And I just urge the New South Wales government and people in New South Wales to look outside of New South Wales at what other states and territories are doing in order to crush and kill the virus. That's a better approach. The idea that somehow it's better to have the virus and then just manage it, I don't think is the correct approach.
What's your reaction to Clive Palmer and Gordon Hanson not entering the election race? Are you worried about an advertising blitz for the protest vote?
Look, I expect Mr Palmer will still launch a major advertising campaign against the state government. We fought him and beat him in his efforts to bring down the borders. And we've stopped him taking the state government for $30 billion. No doubt he is a very, very angry man sitting there in his Queensland bunker, and I expect he'll launch an advertising campaign against the state government. So we will still have to fight the Liberal Party and Clive Palmer. They have been very close allies over past years. And I just urge everyone across Western Australia not to support Clive Palmer and his allies, the Liberal Party. No, not at this point, no. No, he has not at this point in time, as far as I'm aware, unless he's lodged something today, dropped that action.
Jack Kirkup said he'll guarantee that his party won't accept any donations and that they want to spread the same message that he's not welcome here in WA.
We've seen over the last few years the Liberal Party and Clive Palmer work together. They've been very close allies. And Mr Palmer runs huge advertising campaigns against state governments, and he will against my government, to support the Liberal Party. So that has been the experience. That has been the experience. And I don't think it will be any different. What we saw over the course of the last year is the Liberal Party support Clive Palmer in his efforts to bring down the border. They supported Clive Palmer, in part, in his efforts to take Western Australia for $30 billion. And so they are still joined. They are still friends. And it's a very, very bad relationship and a bad alliance between Mr Palmer and the Liberal Party. So we'll have to, we'll no doubt have to fight Mr Palmer, the Liberal Party, the National Party and One Nation. But if we want a government that's going to keep Western Australia safe and strong, then I'd urge everyone to support my government.
Polling today to West, about 2/3 of West Australians are wary of taking a vaccine that's received emergency approvals. Are you concerned that there might be some resistance to getting the coronavirus vaccine when it becomes available?
Well, it'll become available to the most vulnerable cohorts late February, mid to late February, and so that'll be people in aged care, people working in quarantine, those sorts of cohorts across the community. And I'd urge everyone to take it. Then it'll be rolled out progressively to other Australians, depending upon their vulnerability. So I just urge everyone to take it. I'll be taking it. I'll be making sure I set the right example because it's the right thing to do. I understand that there are sometimes concerns about these things, but I just urge everyone to listen to the science and make sure you protect yourself and your family.